Hey Ben, we're glad to have you today. We'd love to hear a little bit about who you are and your athletic background. But we understand you're a developmental scientist and you focus on the emotional well-being of athletes. What made you focus on athletics in particular?
Yeah, I think part of it was my own experience of growing up as an athlete and competing on a collegiate level and a little time after being in college. And through my doctoral studies, I came to the realization that when it comes to sports, there's a lot of information on how to enhance performance and what it means to perform well and how to excel in your performance. But there wasn't a whole lot on the emotional health. And so I started out studying some of the biological and physiological underpinnings of stress and health and looking at identity development within youth and at-risk youth. And then it kind of naturally brought me to athletics because of my background and then doing some chaplaincy work at the World Track and Field Championships.
Hmm. And how did you, what's your athletic background?
I was a cross country and a track runner, and I ran track at Oral Roberts University and competed in the NCAA championships, and then also competed in the U.S. indoor championships and ran some national and international events before injury kind of took over.
So as I understand, you work a lot with the emotional state of athletes, and for myself and probably for some other people out there, um, one of one of the ways we've been trained as athletes is really not to pay too much attention to our emotional state. Why do you feel like that's important for an athlete, for a coach?
Yeah, I think at the bottom line is emotional health matters. That who we are as individuals inevitably impacts our performance, and so being able to understand what stress can do to you and the pressure to perform, particularly that over time that can take its toll. That when people base their identity of who they are, their value system, on how they perform on a regular basis, that takes a toll on our body because we end up putting that pressure on ourselves every time we perform, which can lead to more performance anxiety, as well as feeling more shameful or feeling bad about yourself when you lose. Because in sport, unfortunately, I think the lows are lower than the highs are higher. And what we found in research, what has been found in research, is really those who place their identity in performance, and their central view of themselves comes from athletics. It can lead to higher burnout rates. It leads to problems after you retire. It also can lead to higher anxiety. And so it's important for us to pay attention to our own emotional health and where we derive our value beyond just sport.
Is there anything that you've noticed, maybe a couple pointers for us that you think we should pay attention to as we proceed about sports and coaching?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that are important. Number one, I think that we have to enjoy the process.
Hmm.
I think many Christian athletes understand that their athletic ability is a gift from God. Unfortunately, I think sometimes that gift becomes a burden. And I think part of the problem is that many times athletes who are Christians believe that the gift was given, that the gift of athletics is actually for God. And I would argue that actually that gift is for you. It's for you as an athlete, and it's for you to be able to enjoy. Now, this does not mean that sports and athletics is always going to be enjoyable, because there's always having to work hard and push through pain, and there's going to be disappointment. That's inevitable. But to understand the joy of the process, to take in the moment of competing and what it feels like to in some ways worship God with that, rather than try to glorify God with that, because he doesn't need your athletic ability to glorify his name. He's given it to you for you to interact with him and to enjoy. And that's a very different model to take when we talk about a Christian athlete.
If you could go back in time and work with yourself, would there be anything that you would tell a young Ben to focus on, or a different way to approach athletics than you did when you were growing up and competing? Is there any advice you would give yourself?
I would be my harshest critic. So I'd always think of what's next, and I'd also evaluate what I had done in the past. And I think that what anxiety does is it really kind of gets a hold of you, because it's very future oriented all the time. It's thinking about the next thing that's coming. And what can happen is that can rob you from the present moment, of taking each moment, each breath, every time you compete, every time you go to practice, as an important moment. So you understand the process of getting better, rather than being driven by the results. And I came from a background where a very loving background, and where I formed part of my identity based on the relationships I had with my family. But I still had a tendency to be very performance based in my identity, because I wish I would have been a little bit more intentional on really enjoying the process and understanding who I am apart from just sport. Because it made it very difficult for me when I had to walk away from the sport, because I went through basically kind of an identity crisis again. And so I think enjoying the process while it's there, because it is a short window of your life, can enhance the experience.
Is there something about how we form identity as an athlete that is unhealthy? And if so, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the beauty of sport and athletics is it has the capability to help people develop healthy models of self, healthy work ethic, and encourages them to be better people. However, the flip side of that is when identity gets based on performance, it has the ability to destroy people's lives as well. And I think you have to be intentional about how identity is formed, particularly when we talk about from a Christian perspective, that there's this integration piece of what God's unconditional love is. And that as athletes, when you have to earn everything, when medals are earned, we have to work hard to earn our accolades. It can get mixed up with understanding God's unconditional love, that in fact His love is not earned. That it is always present, it's always there, and how we integrate that into our lives is really an important piece. And so identity based on performance can lead to seeing competition as a threat to yourself, that you feel like your worth and value is at stake every competition, which is a lot of pressure. And with that comes real physiological effects of the sympathetic nervous system, which I won't get into, but it's that anxiety system that can inhibit our ability to perform in the moment because of this perceived threat. And then after that moment, and there's disappointment of shame and shaming yourself, and it all is a cycle, as opposed to understanding sport as an expression of, or competition as an opportunity for growth or an expression of who you are, is that you are able to go out there and put it all out there to the best of your ability, but walk away knowing that the results don't define who you are. And that allows you the freedom to experience competition as an opportunity for growth. And not all the time do we perform well, and when we don't, you're able to evaluate the performance, not evaluate the self.